Good afternoon. Thanks. I'm actually shocked that there's this many people here. I thought we would have like a dinner table for 8, and that's how we would do this last session. So, hey, I'm glad you're here. 2 things about the title. So, how does this fit in the future of legal education? Well, I hope that as we are deciding what the future of legal education is going to be, that at least in part, we're basing that on high-quality research. So that's the first part. And the studying outstanding law teachers, I hope the future of legal education still wants us to have effective teachers. I think that'll be part of it. This. When I came to Edmonton 2 days ago, I get off the plane, and I get to the customs place, and there an exam is administered to determine whether I am suitable to enter the country. And the exam went like this. My customs professor said to me, well, where are you going? I said, the University of Alberta. She said, why are you going there? I said, I'm attending a conference. She said, are you speaking at the conference? I said, yes. She said, what are you speaking about? I said, a book. She said, do you plan to sell the book? I thought, this is a trick question. I don't know what the right answer is. And so I told her, well, I brought 1 copy, which I think will satisfy consumer demand in Edmonton while I am there. So part of what I'm talking about today is this book. Most of what I talk about is going to be how we did this, not what we found, although I'll weave in a little bit of what we found. But I do want to start with the title. I hate the title of this book. I lost the battle on this one. Here's why I hate the title of the book. First, it's arrogant. So we studied 26 law teachers in the United States. Apparently, there are no best law teachers in Canada, Australia, India, the UK, Brazil, and then it's misleading. I don't know what I don't know what the best law teacher is. I don't think there is the best law teacher. So other than the fact that it's arrogant and misleading, it doesn't have any problems as a title. I was suggesting this. Harvard University Press wouldn't go with that one. Now, I admit there's a snappier, but I thought mine was more accurate. And then as long as I was messing with the cover of the book, I also suggested how we should list the authors. I was suggesting that. My co-authors wouldn't go for that. And by the way, my co-authors, so Sophie Sparrow is a teacher at the University of New Hampshire. Michael Hunter Schwartz is a dean at the University of Arkansas. They are wonderful law teachers, wonderful scholars. It was a privilege to do this with them. But it still can't stop me from making fun of them. Okay. So we were doing qualitative research. We had to teach ourselves what that was and what high-quality qualitative research would be. So there's a little very brief summary of high-quality qualitative research. The only thing I'm going to add right now is the extended period was, we spent 4.5 years doing this research and writing this book. About 3.5 of those years were the data gathering and data analysis phase, and about a year on writing the book. Okay. So our study design, I'm just going to talk about the goals part. That's what we were shooting for. Trying to identify outstanding law teachers, trying to synthesize what they do, trying to write it in a way that is useful for other people. Ultimately, you will decide whether we succeeded in that or not, especially that last piece. Okay, so the starting point for us is we had to identify the people we were going to study, identify outstanding law teachers. We started with this idea. I actually want you to take I'm going to give you 5 seconds right now. Answer that for yourself. Think of a teacher that you have had at any stage in your career a teacher that you have experienced where you think this is true. And put that image of that teacher in your head. Okay. Well, that's what we were asking for. We created a website, we contacted many listservs, we spoke about it, we wrote about it to try to get people to nominate exceptional law teachers. We ended up with 250 plus nominations. I love this. Several people nominated themselves. You know, of course, they're U.S. law teachers. Of course, some of them would nominate themselves. None of them made it into the final, but several nominated themselves. And okay, for anybody who was nominated, we contacted them and we asked them whether they were interested in proceeding. And then, if they were, we were looking for evidence of them producing outstanding learning. That definition that you saw earlier. And we were open to all kinds of different evidence. We gave them some suggestions on what some of that evidence might be. You're looking at some of the suggestions there. Many of them sent us this list and more. And about somewhere between 100 and 125 teachers kept themselves in the process by doing this, by sending us evidence. Okay. We ended up with 26 subjects, and I want to talk to you a little bit about who they are. I got two pictures there. One is Heather Gherkin. Heather teaches at Yale University. The gentleman on the bottom is Rory Bahadur. Rory teaches at Washburn University in beautiful Topeka, Kansas. And so, who they are. We ended up with 15 women, 11 men. 5 of those people were people of color. They were, as a whole, very experienced law teachers. The average number of years that they had taught law school was 20. And so altogether, they had 530 years of law school teaching experience. Where do they teach? They teach sort of across the spectrum in U.S. law schools. So they taught all across the country, north, south, east, west, in the middle. They taught at every spectrum of law school in the U.S., from the top of the food chain to not the top of the food chain. What do they teach? A couple of the teachers were legal writing teachers. A couple of the teachers were clinicians. One of the teachers was an academic support teacher. And the rest of them I would characterize as traditional doctrinal teachers. And that was our 26. We interviewed each of the law teachers. So one of the co-authors showed up at their school, interviewed them for somewhere between 90 minutes and 3 hours. We had a protocol of 25 questions that we asked them. I've given you several of those questions there. That bottom question, are there any good metaphors for your approach to teaching? Again, I want to give you 10 seconds or so. For those of you who are teachers in the room, try to answer that for yourself right now. What's a good metaphor for your teaching? Well, that's 10 seconds, and so here goes. So I'm going to show you 2 of the metaphors that our subjects came up with. The guy on the left, that's Steve Friedland. Steve teaches at Elon University in North Carolina. Here was Steve's metaphor. He's the mental aerobics instructor. And the guy on the right is Larry Krieger. Larry teaches at Florida State University. Larry actually runs their externship program. Here was Larry's metaphor. Yeah, I couldn't have done that. I'm not good at the metaphor thing, but I'm super impressed by the stuff that people came up with. And actually, across the board, the 26 teachers, I thought, came up with fabulous metaphors for their teaching. So a big hunk of what we did was interview each of the teachers. Another big hunk is we saw each of them teach. When we saw them teach, we kept a log of their teaching. Oh, sorry. I want to tell you a little bit about one of the teachers that I observed, and it's not that teacher. So I forgot to put his picture here. It's Hiroshi Matamura, who teaches at UCLA. Hiroshi and I had a hard time agreeing on when this was going to take place, and we're both busy, and so we finally find a day. And I make that reservation like 2 months in advance, and 3 weeks before the day, Hiroshi calls me and he goes, "Oh, I really have a problem with the day." And, okay, Hiroshi, what's the problem? And Hiroshi said, well, it's the day that their first graded legal research and writing memo is due. And it's due right before my class. So I'm worried that students aren't going to show up, that they will have been up all night, and that it's just not going to be a representative class. And I didn't say this to Hiroshi, but my reaction was, cool, I want to see that class. And we couldn't agree at another time, so yep, that's the class I saw. Hiroshi did a fabulous job, I thought, in teaching that class. A really engaging hour with his students, with the students who were there. He was right that some of them didn't show. The students who were there, he had them engaged throughout. Ideas are flying around the room. He's capturing them on some kind of mind map program that I didn't understand, or at least I couldn't do. But just taught a fabulous class. There's a guy sitting in the front row. A big, husky guy sitting in the front row. And within the first 5 minutes, he fell asleep. He slept for the entire class. At the end of the class, he wakes up. He's sort of shocked. He looks at me, he runs over to me and says, "Hiroshi is a great teacher." And my reaction was, yeah, I can tell. I think Hiroshi is a great teacher. But okay, so when we watched people teach, we kept a log of their teaching. And what I mean by a log is we were keeping track sort of minute by minute, what's happening in the room. And that's what you're seeing here is a little bit of a log of a class I observed. The teacher that I observed here was Julie Nice. What a great name for a law teacher, by the way. Julie Nice. Julie teaches at the University of San Francisco. So there, sort of minute by minute, what's happening. I'm going to comment on one of those minutes, and that's the very first minute. So she had about 30 students in the class. As they are coming in the door, she is individually sticking a handout in their hand and greeting them. Right? It only took a minute for that to happen. But she had a 1 to 2 second face-to-face acknowledging them as a human being in that 1 minute. And I thought, wow, what a great minute. So I immediately ripped that off, by the way, and used that in my own teaching now. But okay, the rest of the class, part of the class, there was a little bit of lecture in it. There was some small group discussion in it. And as I say, we're keeping track of that minute by minute. For those of you in the room who are teachers, here's a scary experiment for you. Sometime have one of your colleagues sit in the back of your class and track minute by minute just this. Track teacher time, teacher talk versus student talk. So how many of the minutes are taken up by us speaking? How many of the minutes are taken up by students speaking or students doing something else? I don't think there's a right answer to that, but I think most people are very surprised when they get that feedback. Even teachers who think, oh, I'm not lecturing, I'm not spending most of the time talking, most of us are. So again, I don't think there's a right answer to it, but it's really helpful data and easy to collect. Focus groups. For each of the teachers, we had at least 2 focus groups for each teacher. One was with current students, one was with alumni. For some teachers, we had more than 2. We had 5 questions. There the 5 questions are. I'm going to focus just for a second on the second question. One of the words I heard from students again and again and again was the word deep, that they characterized their learning as deep. in these people's class, in this person's class. We, just like our interviews with the teachers, we ended up transcribing all of the focus groups and all of the interviews, and that became a primary hunk of our data. Documents. We asked our subjects to provide us with as much of this as they could provide us. They ended up providing us with 6,000 pages of stuff that we eventually all looked at. Coding. So for this hunk of it, for the interviews, the observations, the focus groups, the teaching philosophy statements, we ended up with 1,000+ pages of that. And each of us read through that 1,000 pages. As we were doing that, we were coding that. So for each hunk of text, we were characterizing it. Words like this, we were using to characterize it. We ended up with 95 codes. Then our final step in data analysis was this, codes into themes. Taking those 95 codes and the content of those codes and developing a set of themes that came from that. Here's the, this was the most important piece for me. The reason that I was so concerned about this is my co-authors and I have all written and spoken a lot about legal education and teaching and learning in law school. So I was worried that we would just find what we wanted to find. We would find the things we had talked about before. And so we're trying to build things into the process to minimize that. I'm going to talk about the last two. So researcher triangulation, this is a awkward way of saying each of us read through all of the data. And each of us independently did that coding. And we were constantly asking ourselves this, not is this what I think, but is it in the data? And we ended up with 7 themes. There they are. Each of those themes became a chapter in the book. And I'm going to focus on a couple of them. So expectations. The higher ed literature is full of the notion that, high expectations by the teachers lead to higher levels of learning for students. I think it's actually quite a bit more nuanced than that. So what we heard a lot about expectations from students and teachers, and this is what we heard. So yes, high expectations matter a lot. They need to be clear. Students need to understand what those expectations are. They need to be achievable expectations for every student. So this is something we're expecting every student to be able to achieve in the class. I think that's actually a very basic respect thing, that we expect success from every student. And then this, reciprocal, that if we have high expectations of them, we should be demonstrating that with high expectations for ourselves. This is Stephen Homer. He teaches at the University of New Mexico. Here's one of his students, what one of his students said about him. He expects the best from everyone, and I think it's reciprocal because he gives us his best too. You're expected to work hard, turn in good product. It's quite remarkable that he pushes us in the way he does without it becoming threatening. Another theme was relationships with students. I think I'm going to comment on 2 of those. Mutual respect. This was just throughout the data that we gathered. I think for students and teachers, this was simply non-negotiable, that there was mutual respect, and that is teacher to student, student to teacher, student to student. And it was just foundational, fundamental. And then the third bullet, focus on student learning and success. Many students made this comment, oh, it's not about her. It's not about him. It's about us. It's about what we learn. And I thought, great. I'm going to stop with this. That's a barometer, by the way. Part of what I hope that people who read the book take away is this notion of us being the best teachers we can be. And I think there are many, many different ways to do that. And so I have a story about a barometer that I hope makes that point. In a different life, I taught elementary school. And we had a consultant come to talk to us about gifted education. That consultant told us this story. It's the only thing I remember from the day. The consultant was working with an 8th grader, a gifted 8th grader. And the gifted 8th grader had just done poorly on a high school physics exam. The consultant looks at the exam with the student. Question number 1, if you're given a barometer, how can you tell the height of a building? The student says, I know what answer the teacher wanted. The teacher wanted me to say, you can take the barometric pressure at the top, take the barometric pressure at the bottom, you can figure out the height of the building that way. Or you could go to the building with a string, go to the top of the building, tie it onto the barometer, lower it to the bottom, measure the string, and figure out the height of the building that way. Or you could go to the building on a sunny day, stand up the barometer, measure the shadow of the building. You could figure out the height of the building that way. Or you could go with a stopwatch, go to the top of the building, drop the barometer, measure how long it takes for it to smash on the ground. You can figure out the height of the building that way. Or, and this is the answer the student gave, you could find the building superintendent and say, hey, I'll give you this barometer if you tell me how tall this building is. Yeah, lots of ways to find the height of a building with a barometer, lots of ways to be a great teacher.